Now, if you were to only take one thing away from this entire season of the podcast to fundamentally take your relationships to the next level in the long term, it would be this. Invest in people like someone would invest in a business, because amazing people become increasingly amazing over time. It baffles my mind that this is something that nobody talks about. It's the low-hanging fruit of relationship building. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Community Made Podcast. I'm your host, Jayson Gaignard. Now, as mentioned in the last episode, for the most part, all season long, I've been laying out the groundwork on how to grow your network. If you listen to all the episodes thus far, you have a framework when it comes to fostering deep and genuine relationships with people at conferences and networking events. Even if you're an introvert, you have the mindset to reach the unreachable and strategies to befriend celebrities and billionaires. You've been given the playbook on how to host dinners and unique live experiences, and you have the roadmap on how to make the most out of a mentor-mentee relationship. Your relationship base must be growing at record speed at this point, which is awesome. You've got a solid foundation on which to build an absolutely world-class network, but you're not there yet. The key to taking your connections to the next level is going to be how you organize your relationships and the vehicles you use to invest in them. In the last episode, I shared the gold standard of relationship structure: your core, your connectors, your community, your fans, and your fringe network. In today's episode, I'm going to share the 6 ways to invest in your most important relationships, most of which won't cost you a penny. Just as a quick heads up, we have a relationship investment PDF to accompany this episode, which can be found in the Community Made group. If you're not a member, lucky for you, it's free. Simply visit communitymade.com to get access. As a second quick side note, we decided to take some of the concepts from this season on how to grow, nurture, and amplify your business relationships and do a deep dive in a live, intimate workshop setting. To my surprise, that first workshop sold out before we actually released season 2 of the podcast, so we decided to announce a second date. So for dates and availability, visit superconnectorworkshop.com. That's superconnectorworkshop.com. And third, if you're a fan of what we're doing here at Community Made, I would be forever grateful if you would share this podcast with a friend. I specifically avoided the traditional marketing methods of building an audience for the podcast because I don't care for vanity metrics. I don't want a lot of listeners. I want the right listeners. And I'm a firm believer that amazing people like yourself know other amazing people. So if you know someone who would benefit from an episode of one of the seasons, please send it along to them. All right, enough with the housekeeping. Let's get on with today's show. Now, in 2011, I attended an event in Napa Valley. During this event, there was a 22-year-old in the back of the room who was referenced a few times from the stage during one of the sessions. Because of that, he caught my attention and I was intrigued. On the final evening, I ended up connecting with him over dinner, and the following year, Ryan went on to become the director of marketing to a $500 million a year apparel company and has since launched an agency to support some of the biggest authors of our generation with the launch of their books, along with releasing 4 best-selling books of his own. In 2013, I received an email from a former preacher who said he had heard about my story of reinvention and wanted my guidance. He drove an hour and a half in order to join me for lunch. He disclosed that he just got out of a very serious relationship and was struggling financially. With a little direction and a few new connections, Nick doubled down on his interests in marketing and became one of the most sought-after experts on Facebook advertising in the marketplace in only a few short years. In 2016, I hosted a mastermind dinner in Vancouver, Canada, where I was introduced to someone who was spearheading an initiative to clean up plastics from the ocean. David went on to deliver a very notable talk from the TED stage less than a year later, and now has the ears of several heads of state and the royal family. I share these stories to illustrate that most focus the bulk of their energy striving to connect with the big names. In the entrepreneurial space, that could be the individuals like Tim Ferriss or Richard Branson or John Paul DeJoria. But the fact is, there's a lot of noise at the top, and these people are rarely seeking new friends. Plus, given their social status, almost everyone they interact with at this stage of their life ultimately wants something from them. Even if you wanted to build a genuine relationship with someone notable, they have their guard up, and rightfully so. I was at an event a few years ago that was filled with just an eclectic group of people. And at one point, I found myself sitting next to Travis Kalanick from Uber and Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google. Now, most people would really go out of their way to strike up a conversation and connect with them, but I had very little desire to. The reasons are, first, on the surface, we share very little commonalities, right? I talk about the power of uncommon commonalities a few times in this season, which is the key to building a deep, genuine connection. Uber was one of the fastest growing companies in history, going from 3 employees to 5,000 employees in 3 years. And second, the desire to connect with either of them would most likely stem purely from ego, striking up conversation only so that I can name drop that I met them, or if I was lucky, take a photo so that I could post on social media. For me, building relationships is like investing in a business. You can invest a lot of money for a very small stake in an already successful business, or you can find a business that is undervalued or early stage and invest a little bit of money for a bigger share. A focus on connecting with big names will result in you owning a tiny fraction of real estate in their minds, if you're lucky. However, investing in people early before they 10x and make it big is a significantly smarter play. The best time to become friends with Tim Ferriss was in 2006 when he was going to events trying to get traction for his soon-to-be-released book, The 4-Hour Workweek. Not now, when he's a 5-time New York Times bestselling author and one of the most sought-after angel investors in Silicon Valley and a host of one of the top 10 podcasts on iTunes worldwide. The best time to become friends with Richard Branson would have been back in 1970 when he was first setting up his mail-order record service. Not now that he's been knighted at Buckingham and the Virgin Group controls over 400 companies, including ventures in spaceflight and telecommunications. The best time to become friends with John Paul DeJoria was when he was sleeping in his car hustling Paul Mitchell hair products from salon to salon, not when he's riding high with Patron tequila and has a personal net worth of over $2.8 billion. So be a talent scout. Think of relationship building as if you're an early investor. Look at people who have incredible potential but aren't yet discovered and play the long game. Even though many big name entrepreneurs are often within my reach, I would rather invest in the diamonds in the rough. In business, you will always get a greater multiple investing in a startup or a rising star versus an established brand, or in this case, a big name. In business, the earlier you have an opportunity to invest, the bigger the chunk of the business. And the same rule applies when it comes to relationships. The earlier you invest, the more real estate you will own in their head and in their heart. Don't be like Ron Wayne, who was one of the original co-founders of Apple, who sold his stock in the company for about $800 back in the day, which would now be worth over $35 billion. Find people who are undervalued, underappreciated, and show great potential and double down on them. Now, if you were to only take one thing away from this entire season of the podcast to fundamentally take your relationships to the next level in the long term, it would be this. Invest in people like someone would invest in a business, because amazing people become increasingly amazing over time. It baffles my mind that this is something that nobody talks about. It's the low-hanging fruit of relationship building. With that said, the next logical question is, well, how does one invest in people, right? In business, it's clear. You invest money, you get stake in a business in return. In relationships, the only advice you generally hear is be of value to others. And the problem with that advice is that it's super vague, and therefore it's hard to take action on. Plus, it often leads people to ask the worst question possible in relationship building, which is, how can I help you? I'll explain why asking a question like that does more harm than good a little later, and I'll also share 6 actionable ways that you can invest in your most important relationships. But regardless which one of these 6 strategies you decide to leverage, the foundation is always the same. And that foundation is building relationship intelligence. Relationship intelligence is all about capturing the facts, the quirks, dreams, aspirations, what they care about, who they care about, what they're good at, what their goals are, and the obstacles that stand in their way. Anything and everything that is unique or important to an individual who you're looking to invest in. Driven by a deep level of caring and curiosity in people, I strive to capture intelligence with every single interaction. I always talk about the ABCs of being a super connector, which is always be collecting, always be curating, and always be capturing. If I'm engaging with someone who I know is a parent, I'll make a point to ask about their kids. I'll ask, how many kids do you have? How old are they? What are their names? And so on. And I'll capture that. If someone in conversation says that they're working on a book, I'll ask, do they have a release date in mind? And if so, I'll capture that. I'll also leverage social media to dig deeper into their lives because you can get a lot of great intel from someone's Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. Now, in case you're a little stuck as to the type of things that I'm making note of in my own relationship intelligence, here are a few examples of what I've captured and cataloged based on my own recent interactions with people I'm connected to. So, Nadine is starting 2 new ventures next year, a subscription service business and a protein-infused tea company. Kevin has performed magic since he was a kid. Ben's business anniversary is on November 13th. He started his business in 2006. Ron is having his first child, a son specifically, in January. Chris is raising financing and is hoping to be fully funded by March. Salim is moving to Toronto in July. Catherine is hosting a charity dinner in September. Joey's launching a book in April with the goal of hitting the New York Times bestseller list. Michelle is passionate about team onboarding. Jason is participating in a charity boxing match in November. And Todd wants to start a podcast and asked me about podcast equipment. Now, as you may start to see, when you focus on gathering this kind of relationship intelligence, the ways in which you can invest in these relationships starts to become apparent. If I know someone is about to become a parent, I'll make a note in my calendar to reach out to them a few weeks after the baby arrives to see how things are going. Or if I know someone is coming out with a book, I'll reach out to them a week before or a couple weeks before and ask how I can support them with the launch. Now think of an investment as any kind of highly personalized touch point, outreach, or interaction that communicates to that person that they are valued and appreciated. Now, the most common type of relationship investment is providing resources that are some way valuable to that person. This might be offering recommendations, extending knowledge or expertise, opening up your Rolodex and offering contacts that could be, a connection to that person that may help them, or it could be, opening up your pocketbook in a traditional investment sense and offering capital. Ultimately, you're helping them get from where they are to where they want to go quicker than if they were to do it on their own. You're helping them overcome the obstacles that stand between them and their goals. And again, this is where the creation of the personal balance sheet, which we explained in episode 3, networking at events, really comes in handy. Having already mapped out your interpersonal assets and how you can be of value to others gives you a clear overview of the different resources at your disposal that you can leverage to invest in your most valuable relationships. A lot of people use being resourceful as a vehicle to invest, and it's effective. I mean, it's something that I focus on a lot myself, and it's a great way to be of value to others. But with that said, there are 5 other unique ways to invest in relationships. The caveat, though, is that they can't be faked. Sorry, they just can't. If you don't care deeply about people, none of the following 5 investment vehicles will work because they completely rely on a solid foundation of empathy and care. Bob Chapman, author of the wildly successful book, The 5 Love Languages, once said, "The art of listening is not to hear what someone says, but to hear how they feel." Empathy is being able to understand how someone feels on a deep level, their wants, their needs, their fears, their aspirations, their desires. Helping them make their way through the world and supporting their success by providing resources is one thing, but nourishing their soul by addressing their feelings and being their biggest fan is another, which is our second way you can invest in relationships. Let me give you an example of what that means. A very good and notable friend of mine was getting ready to launch his first book, and his goal was to hit the New York Times bestseller list like most authors. Now, taking an empathic view on the situation, I thought about all the fears and doubts that anybody launching their first book might come up against. So what if I don't sell a lot of copies? Or what happens if nobody leaves a review? Or what happens if people do leave reviews, but they're all, negative and they're not positive? I then asked myself, how can I help curb these fears and doubts and be his biggest fan? And a couple things came to mind. From a resource perspective, I put him in touch with a few friends of mine with large audiences who could help him with promotion. And for launch week, I bought 100 copies of the book myself and gifted it to people on our email list with no strings attached. Second, I not only posted about the book on my own social media accounts leading up to the release date, but I really made a point to go above and beyond what was said in these posts. They were really in-depth and really thought out. Ultimately, I designed marketing pieces much more so than just posting a link on Facebook and saying, hey, so-and-so's coming out with a book, you should check it out. Also, on the morning of the book launch, I made sure that I was not only one of the first few people to leave a glowing review on Amazon, but I prepared that review in advance so it was super detailed, well-researched, and made direct references to the book and things inside the book. The end result was that he did indeed hit the New York Times bestseller list, and he made number 2 to be exact. But his follow-up message to me was that he told me that my gestures, the connections, the buying the books, the social media promotion, the review meant the world to him because it turned out that he had a lot of friends that he thought he could count on for support during the launch, but unfortunately, they didn't come through the way he anticipated. Being someone's biggest fan is all about noticing when someone is vulnerable and being their greatest cheerleader. As a side note, I hesitate to use the word greatest because I don't want you to think that you need to be over the top with support all the time, because you don't. The way I look at it, the more vulnerable someone is and the faster you respond, the bigger the investment you've made into them and ultimately that relationship. Timing is everything. If my friend hit the New York Times list and then I came in to support him, it wouldn't have nearly had the same effect. I was the first to buy a bulk book order. I was the first to shout out from the rooftops on social media. I was the first to leave a review on Amazon. What made my support impactful is that I came in when his fears and doubts were at their peak. Here's another example that shows how timing plays into being someone's biggest fan. A few years back, a really good friend of mine generously was raising money for a charity, and naturally my wife Candace and I were happy to support their campaign. Well, I want you to listen to the thank you message I received from him later that day.
Jason, what's up, man? Hey, we're just driving back from having dinner down at the beach, and we were just looking over the campaign for the Charity Water Project, and we are just absolutely grateful for everybody that contributed, and especially you, man. You were the first name that popped up. I don't even know how to say thank you. I'm both grateful to have you as a friend, as somebody that's in our lives, to have you jump in there without even skipping a beat and participate and really set things off. I mean, we totally broke through our goal in 24 hours. We think we can do more. We're going to do more, but we wanted to shoot this quick video to tell you how much we love you guys, you and Candace and the family, and can't wait to see you guys and how grateful we are to have you part of that campaign, man. It's, I don't know, it really showed me how amazing our group of friends are and how blessed we are to have all of you guys part of our lives.
At its core, the biggest fan philosophy is about addressing someone's doubts and fears by being their greatest cheerleader. It's about believing in someone when they may not fully believe in themselves. In order to achieve any kind of greatness in your life, you need to push outside your comfort zone. You need to grow at your outward edge. And when you expose yourself to the unknown, doubts and fears naturally creep in. I don't care who you are, right? I think most people confuse the notion of confidence for courage, and I think there's an important distinction to make here. In my experience, one does not lean into the unknown with confidence. Taking this back to entrepreneurship, I can't think of a single person who launched a new venture that wasn't terrified on some level, right? You earn confidence over time by seeing your idea get traction and seeing social proof and witnessing the sales rolling in. I mean, make no mistake about it, what pushes you outside your comfort zone, what pushes you to grow at your outward edge is courage. And when someone is demonstrating courage, it's your opportunity to stand by their side and cheer them on. Maya Angelou once said that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. If we're lucky, I think we can all look back on a time when somebody believed in us when we didn't necessarily believe in ourselves. And if I could buy people at what they think they're worth and sell them at their true value, I'd be filthy rich. As mentioned in the mentorship episode, a lot of people in this world have gone further than they thought they could because someone else thought they could. Without a doubt, the biggest fan philosophy and ultimately belief is one of the best relationship investment vehicles one can leverage. The third tool in the relationship investing toolbox, I guess you could say, is thoughtful gifting. Using gifting as a way to invest in a relationship may be a no-brainer to some, but the key word to focus on here is thoughtful. At our core, humans are incredibly simple. After 32 years on this planet, I've come to realize that 95% of my arguments, my conflicts, my general friction in life when it comes to people, regardless whether it's personal or professional, stems from one thing and one thing only: our primal need to be seen, to be valued, to be heard, to be understood, to be appreciated. All of these fall under the umbrella of being seen. Being seen is tied to our strong need to belong, and belonging, as mentioned in previous episodes, is tied to our survival. 10,000 years ago, if you were not valued within a tribe, there was a good chance they wouldn't keep you around. And if they didn't keep you around, there's a pretty good chance you were going to die, right? You'd either starve to death or you get eaten by an animal that's bigger than you. So what does this have to do with gifting? Everything. The simple act of gift giving should leave the recipient feeling seen, heard, valued, understood, or appreciated. With that said, when done wrong, gifting can do more harm than good. Remember the old adage that people used to justify crappy gifts by saying, it's the thought that counts? No, that's BS, right? If it's a bad gift, it's because they put very little thought into it in the first place. A good gift makes someone feel seen. A bad gift does the opposite. It can create resentment. You're actually better off giving no gift than a poor one. And thankfully, if you double down on capturing relationship intelligence, thoughtful gift-giving ideas will be easy to come by. And lucky for you, I did a full episode on effective gift-giving called Holiday Giving, 3 Reasons You're Doing It Wrong. So if you want to learn how to 10x your gift-giving investments and make a lasting impression, go back and check out that episode. But really quickly, let's say you're early on in your career, you're either strapped for cash or maybe you simply don't have a thoughtful gift in mind. There's a fourth relationship investment tool that you can use or leverage called good old-fashioned gratitude. Coco Chanel said it best when she said the best things in life are free, the second best things are very, very expensive. William Arthur Ward said feeling gratitude and not expressing it is like wrapping a present and not giving it. I get gifts all the time, and in full transparency, I don't keep every gift. I can confidently say, though, that I keep every single note. Because at the end of the day, we all have a yearning to be appreciated, to feel significant, to feel loved. And so many of us are so darn critical on ourselves that sometimes a well-timed note of gratitude to let us know that our work matters, or more importantly, that we matter, nothing comes close to it. So sending a note of gratitude or a personalized video of appreciation does not cost a dime, but it yields high returns. The fifth investment vehicle for your most important relationships is investing indirectly through your inner circle. I always say that if you want to care about somebody, care about who they care about. This idea stems from Tony Robbins because he's saying that if you want to influence someone, find out who already influences them. So focus ultimately on what my buddy John Ruhlin calls the inner circle. Take that empathetic foundation that we talked about earlier and direct that towards their assistant or their spouse or even their kids. Let me give you a few examples. I went to visit a friend at his house a few months back for some advice, and I took about 2 hours away from what would normally be family time for him. So the following day, I sent an edible arrangement to his daughter with a thank you note for letting me borrow her father for a few hours. In an Instagram post, he posted about the gesture saying, "Big props to @Jayson Gaignard for making our night with his beautiful fruit basket. Our daughter loved it." Another example was recently a friend of mine graciously opened up an office space for me to work out of while I was in the city. So the following day, I sent a large edible arrangement again, not saying edible arrangements are necessarily my go-to, move, but they work rather well. And I sent a large edible arrangement to his team, thanking them for sharing their office with me. A third and final example was a friend of mine's daughter was trying to raise money to go to Disneyland with her choir group, which I originally noticed on her personal Twitter profile. I patiently waited until she was halfway to her goal, and then I funded the campaign so that she surpassed her goal. Again, if you want to show someone that you care about them, care about who they care about. Leverage the same investment strategies we talked about earlier, resources, biggest fan, gifting, and extend that to their inner circle. The result is that you will make them look like a rock star, and make no mistake about it, we all have a deep desire to look good and feel significant in the eyes of those that we care about. Whether that be with a spouse or kids or a cause, Invest in whoever or whatever is dear to them. Ask yourself, how can you indirectly invest in a relationship by caring about who they care about? The sixth and final way you can invest in relationships is the follow-up. Something that doesn't cost anything financially, but goes a long, long way. Follow-ups are an easy yet effective way to do micro-investments in a relationship. Similar to gifting, people often get this wrong because their follow-ups aren't thoughtful and they're not personalized. It's common knowledge that follow-ups are important, but the majority of follow-ups are stale and oftentimes bothersome. To most, it's simply something to kind of check off their to-do list. It's, LinkedIn giving you the ability to send a canned message saying congrats on your work anniversary, which is nice, but because of a click of a button, you receive 79 of the exact same messages on the same day. It's Facebook giving you birthday reminders, or people who program their CRM every 90 days to say, hey, how are you? What are you working on? How can I help you? Amazing. Like, I'm busy enough as it is. Now I need to fill you in on what's going on in my life, even though A, that can all be found through social media updates. B, you really don't care. You're just trying to check off some box off your to-do list. And C, how can I help you is by far one of the biggest sins when it comes to relationship building. Why? For the exact same reason I talked about before. If I was seen, if I was heard, if I was listened to, and if I really mattered, you would identify ways in which you could help me. You would be the one connecting the dots. Saying, how can I help you, puts the onus on me to find a way, and that's not helpful at all. You're giving me more work. If you're stumped on how to support someone, let them know and simply say, if there's any way I can support you, please let me know. Unless you're working at Burger King, remove how can I help you from your vocabulary entirely. When it comes to follow-ups, context matters, as does personalization. A friend of mine positioned it to me that you should treat email, or follow-up for that matter, as a phone call, right? You wouldn't call someone you don't know that well midday and say, hey there, what are you working on, right? You would either ask a better question, or you wouldn't reach out to them altogether. So let that be your filter. Make follow-ups matter. Have them revolve around relationship intelligence that you've collected. If someone is becoming a first-time dad in 3 weeks, set a reminder to send an email 6 weeks later seeing how fatherhood is treating him. If someone has a big speaking engagement in June, send them a text the morning of to wish them luck. If someone is launching a book or a new product, check in with ideas on how you may be able to support with resources or connections. That's how you leverage follow-ups to foster and nurture long-lasting relationships. To show you these 6 investment strategies in action, let's revisit the relationship intelligence captured earlier in this episode. Again, when you capture relationship intelligence, ways in which you can invest in those relationships start to surface. So Nadine is starting 2 new ventures next year, a subscription service business and a protein-infused tea company. I leveraged the follow-up strategy. I created a follow-up email to send out a few months later to see how things were going with her new business. Ben's business anniversary is on November 13th, which again, he started that business in 2006. So I leveraged the gift giving strategy and sent him a happy anniversary gift in November. Ron is having his first child in January, a son specifically, so I leveraged the follow-up and gift strategy and created a follow-up email to send out in February to see how fatherhood is treating him. And I sent him a gift card for a nice dinner for him and his lovely wife to say, don't forget the date nights. Joey is launching a book with the goal of hitting the New York Times bestseller list, so I leveraged the biggest fan. I created a follow-up email to send out a few weeks before the launch, offering to open any doors that I can for book exposure. I posted about it on social media, I bought coffees myself, and I left a review the morning of its launch. Salim is moving to Toronto in July, so I leveraged the gift strategy, and I sent him gift cards to a few of my favorite local restaurants. Jayson is participating in a charity boxing match in November, so I leveraged the gift strategy again. I made a donation, ideally the first donation, as we talked about before. The earlier you can kind of support them, the better. But I also sent along some boxing swag, some like Mike Tyson gear to maybe inspire him a little bit. Catherine is hosting a charity dinner in September, so I leveraged the biggest fan. I bought the first ticket and I promoted it publicly. Todd wants to start a podcast and asked about my podcasting equipment, so I leveraged the gift strategy and purchased and sent him the entire setup. Oddly enough, a few of these people posted about the gifts that they received on social media, so maybe I'll share those in the Community Made group. So really, that's it, right? These are the 6 ways you can invest in relationships. Relationship intelligence, again, is foundational. However, once you have that dialed in, the ways in which you can invest in your most important relationships will start to surface. You can leverage your resources, whether that be your knowledge, your connections, or your capital, to support them to get from where they are to where they want to go. You can make a point of being their biggest fan and show them that when the chips are down, they can count on you. You can make them feel heard or seen using highly personalized gifts, or you can express appreciation through a genuine note of gratitude. You can reach out to that inner circle and care about who they care about, and you can be thoughtful in your follow-up. That is it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for listening. Just a quick reminder, as a heads up, we have a relationship investment PDF to accompany this episode, which can be found in the Community Made group. If you're not a member, lucky for you, it's free. Simply visit communitymade.com to get access. As a second quick side note, I decided to take some of the concepts shared in this season on how to grow, nurture, and amplify your business relationships and go deeper in a live workshop setting. I love the podcast, but to me, nothing beats face-to-face group discussions, just deep diving on a topic for 2 days. Surprisingly, that first workshop sold out, so we decided to announce a second one. So for dates and availability on that, visit superconnectorworkshop.com. That's superconnectorworkshop.com. If you enjoyed this episode, nothing would make me happier than hearing your thoughts or biggest takeaways. Feel free to reach out to me on Twitter at Jayson Gaignard, JaysonGaignard, or email me at jason@communitymade.com. Before I go, I got to give a shout out to Zvi Band. Zvi is actually somebody we featured on season 2 of this podcast. He left the following review on Facebook. He said, "This is one of the few podcasts where I've wanted to re-listen to episodes multiple times. The quality of conversation that Jayson is able to have is almost unrivaled, and his own narrative could stand by itself as great content. If you're looking to get started somewhere, I recommend you give the interviews with Naveen Jain, which is a great one, and Chris Plow a listen." Zvi, my man, love you, brother. Thank you for the review. For the rest of you out there, if you enjoyed this episode of the podcast or like what we're doing here at Community Made, I'll be forever grateful if you would share this podcast with your friends or leave an honest review on iTunes or Facebook, just like Zvi did. We are inching our way closer to the end of the season, and in the next episode of Community Made, I sit down with 2 Super Connector friends of mine, Scott Gerber and Ryan Paw.
I can't think of anything more important when you're a connector than just sitting back and listening to what people have to say, what they're passionate about, what they're trying to do, what their challenges are, and then using that connector mentality that you have to just figure out, how can I help them? What resources and what people do I know, or what people do I know who have resources that can support them? And that's how I do it.
I'll see you on the next episode, ladies and gentlemen. Enjoy your week.